Welcome back, this is Madan. In this video I'm gonna show you how we can add client-side validation to ASP.NET Core MVC application. So this is our project up and running, and in last video session we added a server-side data validation to our pet model. So if we go here and click on the pet model, then it validates our model against the data supplied by us. But we have a small performance issue here. So let's see what this is. I'm gonna right click and open the inspector here and head over to the network tab, and let's click on the add new pet. Let's clear this, and when we click on the save button, then I need you to see in this uh, inspector panel here when I click on the save button. So when we click on the save button, we see a whole bunch of requests made to the server and a whole bunch of data. The CSS files, JS files are loaded back to our page. So when we click on the save pet model, what it does is it goes out to the server and see what validation attributes are there in the model and validate our data against that model. That means it makes a trip to the server, and which is good, but it is very bad from the performance point of view. And if the server is too slow, then it takes some time for the user to get the feedback about the data entered by them, whether the data is valid or not. So wouldn't it be nice if we give the user instant feedback for the data entered by them? So this is done by the client-side validation. So when we add a client-side validation, the validation is performed by the JavaScript code, and we don't need to make the request to the server and see the model to validate, to check our data whether they are valid or not. So to perform the client-side validation, what we need to do is we need to reference the two JavaScript file, jQuery validate.min.js and jQuery validate.unobtrusive.min.js to our layout.cshtml file. And this is all we need to add a client-side validation to our project. So it is quite simple to implement, but it gives a great value to our application and a great response to the user. And how does this work is when the ASP.NET Core renders a view, then it adds the data attribute to the view based on the validation attribute that we provide to our model. For instance, when we decorate our properties with the validation attributes such as require min length, require range, and those things, then when the ASP.NET Core renders the view, it adds those properties with the data attribute in our form. We can see this by doing right click and view page source. First I need to refresh this page back. Let's refresh this, click on add new page, and let's go and view page source. And when we see the HTML generated behind the scene, then what we can see is we can see data val equals true for the name property, and this is generated by the required validation attribute. Similarly, we can see data val min length data attribute associated with our name input control, which is generated by the min length property. And when we add the client-side JavaScript to validate our model, to validate our the user form, then the JavaScript code will look for those data attributes and perform the validation against the value supplied for those attributes. So this is all we need to do to add client-side validation. Let's jump back to our code and include those two files to our layout.cshtml and see what we get with that. So I'm gonna head over to the layout.cshtml file here, and add those two files in our project. So when we create the MVC application, then it adds those files, JavaScript files, to our www folder inside the library. So the .NET Core adds these two files to our project, but it doesn't include that in the layout file, so we need to include those two in our layout manually. So I'm gonna go over here and copy this, and let's paste it here and change and point this back to the jQuery validation script. So it's inside the library folder, and jQuery validation, and inside the jQuery validation there is a dist folder, let's remove this for now, dist, and inside the dist there is jQuery.validate.js, jQuery.validate.js. Let's copy this one more time and include this inside this section, so that this script will be run on the mode other than development. So I'm gonna go and paste it over here. Make sure you include this script below the jQuery script, because this jQuery validate.js is based on jQuery. It requires jQuery. And after that I'm gonna add another library, jQuery validation unobtrusive. So it's inside the library jQuery validation dash unobtrusive unobtrusive, and is jQuery.validate.unobtrusive.js. Let's copy this and include it here as well. So this is all we need to do to add client-side validation to our MVC project. So let's head over to the browser and see our validation, client-side validation in action. So I'm gonna refresh this page here, and this time let's clear the inspector tab, and I want you to see on this inspector tab when I click on the save button. So when I click on the save button, the validation fired, but we don't see any request made to the server. So this gives us a great performance benefit. And if the network is slow, for instance, then that doesn't affect the user to see to check whether the data entered by them is valid or not. That means the client-side validation gives the user instant feedback about their data, and it gives the better user experience. Of course, you should not never rely on the client-side validation, because the client-side validation can be bypassed if the JavaScript is disabled from the browser. So we should always add server-side validation to ensure the data entered by user is valid or not, but we should also add the client-side validation to give a user a better experience. Alright, that's it for now, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.